On January 22nd, leader of the Conservative Party Pierre Poilievre held a press conference inside a Fred's restaurant in West Vancouver. During the conference, Poilievre discussed his party's common sense plan to address our housing shortages, inflation, and immigration. While all pressing topics of concern, which I'll include clips of in the written link for this report below, I chose to ask Poilievre about another pressing Canadian matter. And that one relates to how state-backed media and all of our federal parties have been awfully quiet about the ongoing church attacks that have been happening across the country since a false 215 buried kids claim was made back in 2021.
And we should provide the resources to allow for full investigation into the potential remains at residential schools. Canadians deserve to know the truth.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and a claim that was made on May 27, 2021 by the Tecumseh First Nation band government shook the world and made Canada a focal point of shame on an international level. That claim was that the remains of 215 Indigenous children as young as 6 years old were discovered on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in unmarked graves. While there is no disputing that some of what took place at residential schools was absolutely horrific, including the ripping away of children from their families. But there is also no disputing that the initial claim the band government made about the 215 buried dead Indigenous children was incorrect. In our investigative report called Kamloops, The Buried Truth, which you can watch via the link in the description box below, we've given you all you need to know about what hasn't been discovered yet on those grounds. And we've also kept you up to date about the ongoing Christophobic attacks against churches across the nation, with vandalism and burning that is often tied directly to that initial claim. Yet somehow all of our federal MPs have been quiet about this, to the point that last June, every single one of them in the House stood up for a moment of silence for the discovery of the 215 buried children who were never discovered. Take a look.
In the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence to commemorate National Indigenous Peoples Day and mark the discovery of the remains of 215 children at a former residential school in Kamloops.
That's why when I came here today, I asked the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, the following. Hello. My first question might not be the easiest for a politician to answer, but this is Rebel News, and I'm Drea Humphrey. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
In 2021, the Tecumseh First Nation band government said that they found the remains of 215 children who were former students of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. The reality is that to date, not a single body has been discovered. The band government itself has revised the wording of their claim to say that it's 200 probable graves, no mention of specific children anymore. And the only way to know what's actually beneath the soil would be to excavate, which the band government has not done in 2.5 years to date. Meanwhile, in Canada, 96 churches have been burnt or vandalized across the country since that initial claim was made. Many of the fires are proven arsons, and the vandals often leave messages that tie to the initial 215 kids' claim buried in unmarked graves. My question is, why, just like the leftist media, the NDP, the Liberal government, are the Conservatives also so quiet about this truth and good news, which is that to date 215 children's remains have not been discovered there, when that truth coming from political leaders could potentially help set free Christian Canadians from attacks on their places of worship?
Thank you for your question. I would disentangle two parts, because there is no justification for burning down a church, period. regardless of the other information or regardless of the other justifications that people would claim to use, there is never a justification to burn down a church. And we as Conservatives have called for stronger criminal sanctions for arson against all who carry out these attacks. We've also called for more security infrastructure around places of worship so that we can stop terrorists who burn down churches, who attack mosques and synagogues. Unfortunately, these crimes against religious communities have raged out of control after 8 years of Justin Trudeau's catch-and-release system. After he has divided our country and turned people and groups against each other, we have more violence directed against religious groups, including Christians, than we have ever seen in Canadian history. This is the result of Justin Trudeau. He is not worth the cost, he is not worth the crime, and he is not worth the country that we know and love. And we should provide the resources to allow for full investigation into the potential remains at residential schools. Canadians deserve to know the truth, and Conservatives will always stand in favor of historical accuracy. None of this changes the fact that the residential schools were an appalling abuse of power by the state and by the church at the time. And we need to move forward in a country that is free so that every single Canadian, whether their ancestry goes back tens of thousands of years or whether they have been here for 10 days, has the freedom to live their life and in prosperity and happiness. Thank you.
Well, I gotta say, his response was much better than that of Prime Minister Trudeau. That's because he never actually answered my question to him about the then 20 churches that had been burnt and vandalized. Instead, one of his RCMP detail thugs picked me up like a rag doll and passed me aside for asking the question in the first place. You talked about Canada's last wrongs, the past things they haven't done right. When will you speak out about the 20 vandalized churches? They're burning churches and vandalizing them, and you're not calling it a hate crime. Pierre Poilievre says that a full investigation into the unmarked grave claims should be had. Do you agree? Not just as a journalist, but also as a Black and Indigenous Canadian, that sounds like the first step in truth and reconciliation to me. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. At Rebel News, we don't back down from bringing you the other side of the story. And yes, many Conservatives follow our news, but we will still ask Conservatives the tough questions that you deserve the answers for. If you appreciate our work, including the boots on the grounds reporting we've done to bring you the truth about the 215 children's remains claim and the burning churches across our nation, you can go to rebelfieldreports.com and chip in a few bucks to help us cover the expenses to bring you reports just like this.